from each department. And they really work dedicatedly and identify those assets. Accordingly, the risk assessment has been done. And effectively, of course, the necessary measurements or mitigation or the procedures we developed, and we are still in the journey of further improvement. At the time we can explain further more about the implementation side. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Abdul. Implementation of 27001 not only is an achievement, but I think you get out of it exactly what you put into it. And we'll look forward to talking some more about maybe some of the challenges that you saw that would be useful for other organizations. So thank you very much. And now, Yasir, we would very much appreciate your perspectives as well.
Hi. I hate to sound cliche, but to have a good security program, you need to have a holistic approach. So I understand Claudio's concerns that by focusing on the highest risk or your crown jewels per se, okay, you fail to recognize that you have your weakest links that might not be the most important things for you as a business, but you can have a major incident because of these, non-important, between brackets systems. So I agree with him that the danger of it. That's why you need to have a holistic approach. Sounds cliche, yeah, but you need to cover almost everything to be secure. And Abdul Sattar mentioned asset management, okay, and it's a big surprise for me a few years back. It was a big surprise for me to know that even Fortune 500 companies don't do asset management properly. So they don't know their assets. That's a big problem, So that's why I talked about operationalization of security. And part of that is that, okay, everything has to be done securely. that's the only way. Otherwise, we will not have security. It's similar to safety. So whatever we do, we have to do in a secure way. So it's a culture, it's a behavior, it's in everything. It permeates our existence, everyday life. It's now, we exist in a computer-controlled world. Everything now is computerized. We have to accept that. So everything we do, we have to do it in minding information security, and thinking of safety and thinking of even I might argue even raising our children to understand because we grow up in a world where there are vehicles, right? So early on in our early development in our life, we learn to look left in the road when crossing the road, and to look right. So it's been something that's instilled in us early on. So okay, let's teach all children to look left, when they use their computer. So unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. There is no panacea, and we have to do things the hard way. That's my only comment. So everything has to be, we have to look at all the fronts, we have to fix everything in the castle, and we have to make sure that there's no, and when things do happen, we need to manage the incident properly. Someone mentioned that we need to have incident response. We have to focus equally on protection, detection, and incident response. That's the only way of doing it. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Yasir. One of the things you noted was the importance of asset management. And one of the things that we find when we get called in to do incident response on a big breach is, unfortunately, we almost know within an hour or two of arriving why that organization got breached. Maybe not the specific attack vector, but you can tell very quickly that they don't execute well. And ironically, asset management is one of those areas. It is amazing how often we have to actually deploy asset management tools as part of the incident response because it's clear they don't even know what's on their network. But one of the other things that you mentioned that I thought was really ironic, at least 3 of the panel members mentioned culture as something that's very, very important. And so I think it's probably worth spending a little bit more time exploring culture. Arne, I noted that you said it's important that people, culture, and governance be balanced, but I understand that you also have a concern that oftentimes culture is probably the poorest managed or the weakest, one of the weakest pillars of those 3.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. That's what I'm hearing today, in this morning session and now. It seems as if IT or the cybersecurity team is responsible for applying cultural standards. You know, you have to adhere to a policy and a procedure. You have to do that, and it's really should be something coming from the board and senior management and being pushed down. Because part of the challenge is if if the IT team or the security team is responsible for implementing or ensuring conformance to a cultural standard, which is really norms, behavioral norms, what you do in a good situation, a bad situation, the interaction that you have with your teammates. That really shouldn't be up to the cybersecurity team. That should really be, the cultural tone should be set at the top by the board, accepted by the management team, and then the appropriate steps taken to make sure that everyone conforms. Because I was surprised to hear from Claudio that, you've got people who actually do, let's say are responsible for 1 or 2 breaches, and then you decide to take action. If anything, that should be like a no-go zone. You know what, we've found a USB that has a virus on it, and you should be immediately censured for that and appropriate action taken. And I think that's part of the problem when I look at governance as well. At a higher level, there's got to be a greater integration between cybersecurity and operations. There seems to be a bit of an us versus them component, and really, an engineer in the field knows his business, but he doesn't know security that well. I've seen that, and vice versa. You may not know as cybersecurity specialists engineering, but that's irrelevant. You know security. And it's that division of labor and the respect of each set of skills and attributes and expertise that has to be recognized. You have to work as a team. And again, I think that comes at the top as well. So culture is very important to me because I think it really allows everyone to be aligned and achieve the business objectives, be they with respect to security or meeting their revenue goals, and allows everyone to succeed together. And I think that's part of the problem. When something goes wrong, it's easy to point a finger and say, you're responsible, as opposed to saying, hey, listen, we had an event. What do we do to move forward and avoid it from happening again? And I think that's also a cultural attribute. What do you think?
Thank you. Any other perspectives on culture that anyone wants to jump on?
Well, I agree with the point about the tone from the top. That definitely has to come from the executive members, whether it be the board, the audit committee, the compliance committee, whatever the governing body relating to this space is in your organization. There's generally a disconnect between that part of the organization that recognizes its fiduciary responsibility for cybersecurity. They know their responsibilities for protecting their organization, their environment. But how it gets translated and disseminated down through their organization, that's a whole other story. That's part of that, what you were discussing. It's not being communicated appropriately or effectively down to the next level of the executives who would then understand what their risks really are, what their responsibilities really are. They then usually think that's just an IT problem or it's a security problem or whatever. They don't actually put into perspective of what their leaders are actually looking for because they're not receiving that communication, that gap that is there generally within the different parts of the the world.
And I'd like to make just one comment.
Please.
I'm not representing any a ministerial view, and this shouldn't be looked at as a criticism or a critique. Really, it's an observation that I've had over the last 20 years. Started work with Adobe, then started work doing web-based application development. We had a security breach, which completely destroyed our company. And really, these are just high-level observations. These are not meant to be a finger-pointing exercise. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this is my observation, and it's not indicative of what I see necessarily.
Same here.
Well, you've now introduced another interesting dimension, and frankly, that is the board interaction, and in particular, the relationship between information security professionals and the board. I heard the word gap mentioned a time or two, and it's ironic. We just commissioned about 3 months ago another Ponemon study that specifically looked at the relationship between the board and information security professionals. And what Ponemon found was that there were a number of major gaps, a gap in knowledge, and to some extent that's understandable, but a gap in perspective and understanding, in particular as it relates to incidents and what's important. And what we really tried to focus on out of that study was how do you bridge the gaps between the board and information security professional. It's so important in an organization that, in particular, when you look at the end result and breaches, that needs to be a team. And so how do you bridge those gaps? Any thoughts? Anyone that wants to jump on that? Go ahead, please.
Yeah. This is very important, the query. In our organization, of course, I agree with other speakers what they told. With the strong support from the management, you cannot success or achieve this information security compliance. Just for an example, USB. They mentioned already a sample, USB also. So blocking of the USB access, it is a challenge to IT, and including the higher level, they can ask, okay, why you block and I can't use it. Okay, so the support from the top and the compliance come in picture, it automatically is part of the culture. I'm coming back to Jim, that how you are making a bridge between the employees and to management, the gap. First of all, there are some compliance item, the clause in our information security, the standards, which we need to, first of all, awareness. Information security is everybody's responsibility. It is shared responsibility. So everyone is part of this journey. So you need to aware employees, management, and specifically those key people, key champions of information security. And periodically, frequency-wise, you need to conduct the awareness session as well. Identify where are the area you need to improve. Like, conduct some quiz program, for example, whether they are aware about some of the compliance or the standards, and how to implement. Maybe we can buy their ideas also, how to improve in their department, because it is a shared responsibility. You need to buy their ideas. If it is meeting the standard, if it is better for our culture, implement it. It will add a value to our effectiveness of the implementation. So this type of a culture, once you create, so everybody is part of the team and their ideas coming to the picture, so we are not forcing a way to implement some of the standards, right? So this way you can make a team to achieve that information culture.
Yes, that's some very good points. I suspect that you have some very valuable perspectives, in particular with your focus on business drivers, because too often I feel that we information security professionals we talk our own language, and we don't talk in a language that's relevant to the business and to the board.
Yeah, involving the board, starts with involving your management, and like it cascades down, it also cascades up. So once your chief CEO is involved and your management team is involved, and the way you are approaching security as a strategic initiative or a group of strategic initiatives, because strategic management will not look at tactical things, your day-to-day things. That you need to approach them by talking about strategic measures of what you are going to do in the organization, and you need to come up with a way of engaging them at that level. So as a security management, once you figure out how to do that by looking, first of all, coming up with a security program such as ISO 27001, and also coming up with KPIs. It's been mentioned in the previous panel, and KRIs, measures in general. Let's not call them KPIs, KRIs, or even key exception. But let's look at measures. Even exceptions can be measurements of your performance. So once you engage them at that level,